some nights choose you. The storm didn't build. It arrived, all at once, like something that had been waiting just beyond the edge of the city, watching for the right moment. One breath, the sky above Seoul's Hanam district was the color of an old bruise. The next, it cracked open, violent and absolute, like a verdict being delivered. Rain didn't fall that night. It hunted. It came sideways, needling through every gap, every collar, every crack in every window frame. Street signs bent at angles they weren't built for. The Han River, black and churning far below the hilltop estates, threw white foam against its own banks like something trying to escape itself. And somewhere inside that storm, two small figures moved through the dark. They were running, not the way children run when they're late, not even the way children run when they're afraid. This was the other kind, the kind with no backward glance, the kind that comes when something behind you is worse than everything ahead, even if you can't name what it is yet. Jada was in front. She always was. 9 years old, and she ran like she'd been engineered for urgency. Arms pumping, sneakers hitting the flooded pavement in short, precise strikes. Eyes scanning every doorway, every gate, every window with a light still behind it. Her braids were soaked through and plastered flat against her face. She didn't stop to fix them. There was no time for that. Behind her, struggling not to fall back, was Lila. Lila was quieter, slower, not because she was weaker, but because she was watching. Even now, even here, in the middle of a city that didn't belong to them, with thunder splitting the sky directly overhead, Lila's eyes moved like she was cataloging the world, filing everything. Her arms clutched something tight against her chest beneath her soaked jacket, something she had not let go of since they left. They turned a corner. Dead end. They stopped there, both breathing in ragged pulls, rain slamming down on their shoulders like it had a point to make. A tall iron gate sealed the end of the lane. Beyond it, set far back from the road, half eaten by shadow and climbing vines, was a building. Not a house, a compound. 3 stories of dark stone. Security cameras positioned at intervals too deliberate to be anything other than intentional. Unblinking eyes in every direction. Every window sealed and lightless, except one, second floor, a single amber square, warm, steady, the kind of light that looks, in the middle of a storm, like the last coal still burning. Jada looked at Lila. Lila looked at Jada. No words. 9 years of being the same person in 2 bodies had made words mostly decorative. Jada pressed the intercom. Static. Then silence so complete it felt pressurized. She pressed it again, longer, harder, her small finger trembling from cold that had nothing to do with the rain. A voice came through, low, male, carrying something that wasn't quite irritation. It lived 1 floor below irritation, in the place where irritation hasn't decided yet what it wants to become. You have 5 seconds to explain yourself before I have you removed from my property. Jada didn't flinch. She leaned into the speaker, the way their mother had taught them to speak when they needed adults to hear the whole sentence, not just the small voice delivering it. And she said, "We're 9, we're alone, and we don't know where else to go." Silence. Long enough that Layla reached out and found Jada's hand without looking. Then, a buzz, a mechanical click, sharp as a gunshot in the quiet. The gate swung open. Dangerous men are easy to spot. The mystery is why some of them still answer the door. Han Sung-woo was not a man people approached. In the circles that operated beneath Seoul's polished surface, and there were very specific circles, very specific rules, his name was spoken the way you speak about weather. No drama, just acknowledgement, delivered with the same tone you'd use for a forecast that couldn't be changed. Han Sung-woo is moving on the Incheon ports. Han Sung-woo pulled out of the Gangnam Consortium last week. 3 men crossed him last spring. Nobody's asking where they went. He was 41, built like someone who had made deliberate decisions about how much space to occupy in a room. A jaw that looked carved from something expensive, eyes that processed everything and returned nothing, and a stillness, that particular practiced stillness that most people spent their whole lives mistaking for calm. It wasn't calm. It was control. Absolute. Deliberate. The kind that takes years to build and costs something real to maintain. He ran an empire threaded through legitimate business, shipping, construction, financial logistics, with a shadow architecture beneath it that financed things no one questioned aloud. His lawyers were exceptional, his enemies were cautious, his inner circle was tight. He had no family. He had made that choice on purpose. When he came down the stairs that night, black shirt, bare feet, reading glasses still perched on his head from the documents he'd been reviewing, his head of security, Park Jin, was standing in the entrance hall with the expression of a man who had survived armed standoffs and midnight crises without blinking, and was currently completely at a loss. Sung-woo looked past him. 2 girls, 9, maybe, soaking wet, leaving identical small puddles on his marble floor, identical in every feature, the particular curve of the nose, the fullness at the cheekbones, the way their eyebrows sat low and serious on their foreheads like punctuation marks, braids destroyed by the storm. One of them, on the left, was staring at him with the direct, unblinking focus of a child who has decided to be brave and is quietly terrified of how that decision is going. The other was looking at the floor. Both of them were holding themselves very still. Sung-woo looked at Park Jin. Park Jin looked at Sung-woo. They were at the gate, which answered nothing and everything. Sung-woo returned his attention to the girls. A long beat passed, the kind of beat that, in his world, usually preceded something irreversible. "How did you find this address?" The left one looked up. "We followed the light," she said, and then, as if this were a complete and satisfying explanation, "Our mom always said, 'Find the light when everything's dark,' so we did." Something moved across Sung-woo's face. It was gone before it could be identified. "Your mother," he said. "Where is she?" The girl's jaw tightened, fractionally. "She wasn't home when we got back. She left us a bag and an address. She said if she wasn't back by midnight, if something felt wrong, we should find somewhere safe. It's almost 2. A silence descended on the hall. "My name is Jada. That's Layla. We're not here to cause problems. We just need somewhere to be until she comes back." Sung-woo looked at these 2 small, waterlogged, wholly serious children on his Italian marble floor. Then he said, "Park? Towels. Something warm." He went back up the stairs. He told himself it was nothing, a manageable inconvenience. He would make a call in the morning and have it resolved. He was back in the kitchen in 17 minutes. He would later be unable to explain why. Children can't lie the way adults can. The problem is they carry the truth the same way. Jada was working through a bowl of ramen with the focused efficiency of someone who hasn't eaten since morning and won't allow herself to acknowledge how hungry she is. Lila sat across from her, hands wrapped around a mug of barley tea, not drinking, not eating, just holding the warmth. Sung-woo stood at the counter, arms crossed, expression arranged into neutrality. He told himself he was simply waiting for the situation to resolve itself. "You're not eating," he said to Lila. She looked up slowly, that stillness again, the kind that was unusual in adults, let alone children, like she was deciding, each time someone spoke to her, how much of herself the moment deserved. "Not yet." "Lila," Jada said, the tone of a sibling who is technically 3 minutes older and would like that acknowledged. "He can ask," Lila said, unbothered. She looked back at Sung-woo. "When you've been running scared for a long time, your body forgets it needs things. You have to remind it." Sung-woo studied her. You're scared. Yes, simply. No performance around it. Of what, specifically? She tilted her head. Of you making a fast decision about us. A pause. Confused people make fast decisions. We just need you to be slow. Park Jin near the door looked up from his phone. Sung-woo uncrossed his arms. Your mother's name, he said. Amara, Jada answered. Amara Osei. The name hit the room. And nothing happened. That was the thing. Nothing happened. Sung-woo's expression didn't shift. Not a blink, not a breath, not a single crack in the surface. He had spent 2 decades learning how to make his face into a wall, and the wall held. But his right hand, resting on the counter's edge, slowly closed into a fist. Where is she from? Ghana originally, but she grew up in London. She's been in Seoul almost 10 years. Jada tilted her head, a habit, slightly left, and asked, Do you know her? No, Sung-woo said. Flat, immediate, practiced. Lila looked at him then, not the way children look at adults they're unsure of, the other way, the way that means she had already formed a conclusion and was simply waiting to see if he'd confirm it. Without a word, she reached beneath her jacket and placed something on the kitchen table. A necklace, silver, a thin chain holding a small crescent moon pendant with a single star nested in its curve. The metal was old, not neglected, but used, worn smooth at the places where fingers had touched it most, repeatedly, consistently, over many years. Sung-woo's eyes fell to it. The kitchen went completely quiet. The rain outside sounded very far away. Because Han Sung-woo knew that necklace. He knew it the way you know something that was once yours, in the hands before the mind. He had bought it 11 years ago, in a small jewelry shop near Portobello Road on a gray London afternoon, for a woman whose birthday was coming, and who had laughed once, curled against him in her flat on a rainy morning, about being born on a night when the moon looked broken and lovely. He hadn't thought about that laugh in years. He thought about it now. Some things don't stay buried. They wait, and they always know exactly when to surface. He didn't move. Lila's fingers rested near the necklace, not gripping it, but present, like a hand placed on a door to remind someone it's still closed. Where did you get that? Not a question. The voice of a man restructuring something very large, very fast, in a very small space. Mom wears it every day, Jada said, reading his stillness now, reading it differently than she had at the gate. She never takes it off, but it was in the bag, with your address. She paused. She wanted you to know she sent it. The implication landed like something dropped from a height. Sung-woo turned to the window. His reflection looked back at him, a man standing in a well-lit kitchen at 2 a.m, holding himself very carefully together. 11 years. He'd been 30, still learning what ascension actually cost. He'd gone to London for a meeting with European investors, the kind of meeting conducted in private dining rooms where the food was incidental. He'd had an evening to himself. He'd walked into a small gallery that stayed open late on Thursdays, not for culture, just because it was raining and it had a light on. She'd been standing in front of a painting of a storm at sea. Dark blues and grays, everything churning. And without turning, as though she'd known he'd stopped beside her, she'd said, "It's not violent, you know. Look closer. Everything in that painting is just trying to get somewhere." He had looked closer. He had, in one of the only times in his adult life, not had a word to offer. 4 months, that was all they'd had. 4 months of something that had no logical business existing between a woman like Amara and a man like him. He had told her what he was, eventually, because deceiving her had felt like a specific kind of cruelty he wasn't willing to commit. She'd gone silent for 3 days, and then she'd come back, and then she was gone. Not the way people disappeared in his world, no warning, no confrontation. One morning, her flat was empty, her phone dead, her gallery job vacant, like she'd been edited out of the city entirely. He had searched, quietly, systematically. 8 months, then he stopped. He accepted what the silence was saying. She had seen him clearly, and clearly was enough. He buried it, but he had never bought another necklace for anyone. He turned back to the room. He looked at Jada, then at Lila. Actually looked, not as children, but as a timeline, a calculation his body was already running while his mind was still catching up. The way Lila's jaw sat, the particular stillness she had when she was thinking, the way Jada's head tilted left just slightly, without intention, when she was working something out. That tilt, he knew that tilt. He saw it every time he stood at a mirror and thought about something difficult. His hands were completely still, the most terrifying stillness he had ever held. Truth doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives in a child's jacket pocket, folded into quarters. "How old are you?" Still that careful voice. Surgical. One wrong motion and everything changes. 9, Jada said. 10 in April. April. He said it like a word in a foreign language that he needed to hear twice. Which date? Jada frowned. The 14th. Why? Heng Sung-woo closed his eyes. One breath. Amara had left in July. He had counted it once, in a weak moment during the first year, counted backward from her disappearance, looking for what he could have changed. July. Before that, April. They had met in December, and he remembered her lying beside him a rainy London morning, laughing quietly about being unreasonably tired for weeks, about her body telling her something she hadn't figured out yet. He had told her she worked too hard. She had smiled in a way he understood now. April 14th, 9 years ago. He opened his eyes. Layla, quietly. When your mother packed the bag, did she write anything? Leave anything else? Layla looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her jacket pocket, carefully, like someone retrieving something that matters, and placed a folded piece of paper on the table beside the necklace. He didn't reach for it immediately. He looked at it the way you look at a door you know, once opened, cannot be closed again. Then he unfolded it. He recognized the handwriting from the first letter. Amara had always written like she believed every word deserved its full amount of space. Sung-woo, if you're reading this, they found you, which means what I've been running from got close enough that there was no better option. I know you have questions. I know you have anger too, and you're allowed to. But I need you to understand, I didn't run from you. I ran to protect them. Someone in your circle came to me near the end, told me things, showed me things, said that if I stayed, if the girls existed in your world with your name attached to them, they would become leverage, against you, against others, against themselves. I believed them. Maybe I was wrong, but I couldn't risk being wrong in that direction. Their names are Jada and Layla. They are yours, Sang-woo. They have always been yours. I never stopped wearing the necklace. Find me, please, because if I haven't come back, something has gone wrong, and the person who warned me 10 years ago, I think they were never protecting me at all. The kitchen held its breath. Jada and Layla watched him read, watched him finish, watched him fold the letter closed. Slowly, with the particular care as someone handling the last of something irreplaceable. Then they watched his face. Han Sung-woo, who had not cried since his mother's funeral 17 years ago, who had reconstructed himself in the year since into something that didn't allow for collapse, pressed his fingers against his mouth, looked at the ceiling, and breathed. Slow, deliberate, controlled, for a very long time. When he looked back down at them, something in his eyes was different. Not broken, not soft, but open. The way a room looks when a window is cracked after a long winter. Barely. Just enough. You knew, he said to Layla, barely above a whisper. You knew what this address was. Mom told us, not everything, but enough. Layla held his bees. She said you might not be what people said you were. She said we'd know if she was right the moment we saw your face. A pause. And? His voice was a thread. Layla looked at him the way she'd looked at him since the moment he came down those stairs. The quiet, complete study of a child who has been watching adults for their entire life and has gotten very good at reading what they're trying to hide. She was right, Layla said. And then, so quietly it was almost just breath, we've been waiting a long time to find you. Power is easy. Anyone with enough fear behind them can have power. It's the powerless moments that show you what you're actually made of. He stepped into the hallway. Not fleeing, he had nowhere to go, and more than that, he no longer wanted to, but the decisions forming in his chest needed the particular silence that only empty corridors at 2 a.m. could hold. Park Jin followed, because that was his nature and his function, and because he'd heard enough. Sung-woo stood at the hall window. Rain dragged itself down the glass in long, slow lines. Somewhere in this city, in some corner of it, Amara Osei was in trouble. He knew this the way he knew most things about danger, not emotionally, but structurally. She hadn't sent her daughters into a storm with a bag and a stranger's address because she was frightened. She'd done it because she had run out of time. Someone had taken it from her. The dilemma arranged itself in his mind with terrible clarity. If he moved, if he activated his network, called in his people, used the machinery of everything he'd built, he would have to surface the girls, surface the connection, surface 10 years of hidden paternity in front of men who trafficked in information. His inner circle would know within hours. And in his world, something like this, daughters of Han Sung-woo, hidden, unprotected, now found, didn't stay contained. It became leverage, currency, a weapon available to anyone willing to pick it up. Amara had understood this 10 years ago. She was right. But the alternative, doing nothing, routing this through official channels, handing Amara's fate to people with no stake in her survival, was something the letter on that kitchen table made impossible. He had read it. He had folded it. He had felt the weight of "I never stopped wearing the necklace" press into his chest like a thumb on a bruise. He couldn't unknow that. And underneath both choices, a third thing moved, something cold. The person who warned me 10 years ago, I think they were never protecting me at all. Which meant someone in his circle had not warned Amara. They had removed her, quietly, surgically. And now, 10 years later, they had made a second move. The girls showing up at his door was not chance. The storm had not delivered them. Someone had, which meant someone knew the address, knew the timeline, knew enough about Amara's contingency plan to wait until she was exposed and act. He turned to Park Jin. The letter mentions someone who came to Amara near the end, someone who knew enough about this organization to terrify her into disappearing. He kept his voice below the level where it became something else. Someone from inside. Park Jin went completely still. Sung-woo, think. His voice was quiet, the dangerous kind of quiet. 10 years ago, London. Who knew I was there? Who knew about her? And who, out of everyone in this circle, had a reason to want her gone? Park Jin looked at him. The silence that followed was the silence of a man rearranging his own memories and finding, in the new arrangement, something that had been there the whole time, something terrible hiding in plain sight. The most dangerous betrayals don't come from enemies, they come from the chair closest to yours.
The name Park Jin said was Choi Min-jae, Sung-woo's oldest lieutenant. 15 years at his side, through expansions, through crises, through nights that required decisions no clean person could make. 60 years old, warm in the particular way of men who've learned that warmth disarms. He grew orchids in his study. He collected antiques. He called Sungwoo Kid when the room was empty. Choi Min-jae, who had been in London that December, who had met Amara once, briefly, Sungwoo had assumed, inconsequentially, at a private gathering 2 weeks before she vanished, who had said days later, in the measured tone of a man delivering counsel, "She's not built for our world. A woman that visible, that good, she'll get hurt. Or worse, she'll make you soft at the wrong moment." Sungwoo had heard it as protection then. He heard it differently now. Not a warning, a verdict, delivered by a man who had already written the sentence and was simply announcing it. He made 3 calls, precise, minimal, the kind where very little is said and very much is understood. Then he returned to the kitchen. "I'm going to find your mother," he told them. Jada looked up immediately. "You know where she is?" "Not yet, but I will." He met both their eyes in turn. "While I'm gone, Park Jin stays with you. You don't move, you don't open the door for anyone who isn't me, you don't answer if something rings." He paused. "Understood?" "And if you don't come back?" Jada asked. The question was level, unflinching. This child, he thought. This child. "I will come back." "You can't promise that." "I can promise that I have more reason to now than I've had in a very long time." He held her gaze. "That's what I can give you. It's the truth." Jada studied him, a long, measuring look. Then she nodded, once, slowly, the kind of nod that costs something. Lila, without looking up from her tea, said 2 words. "Be careful." Quiet as a stone dropped into still water. Sungwoo stopped in the doorway, his back to them. He had not been told to be careful in so long that it took a moment to recognize what it felt like, what it did to a person to be told that. "I will," he said, and for the first time in memory, it wasn't a dismissal, it was a promise. He found the facility in 40 minutes. One of his people had pulled the name from Min-jae's private network, a medical subcontract, off-book, registered under a shell that connected back to a shell that connected back to nothing useful unless you knew exactly where to push. Sungwoo knew where to push. The building sat at the edge of the city's industrial fringe, clinical exterior, minimal signage, the kind of place designed to be forgotten between visits. 2 vehicles in the lot, lights on the ground floor only. He went in with Park Jin and 2 others. The first obstacle arrived fast. The front entrance was locked down, keycard access, no override. One of his men tried to run a bypass on the panel. 30 seconds, a minute. Come on. The bypass failed. Wrong frequency. They moved to the service entrance on the building's east side. The door opened, but inside, a corridor with a security desk, a guard, awake, watching a monitor. Sungwoo walked directly up to the desk. He didn't hesitate because hesitation is a tell, and tells get people hurt. He gave the guard a name, a real name, the name of a senior official in the organization that had leased this facility's off-book wing, and said, calmly, that there was a compliance issue requiring immediate verification. The guard reached for his radio. Sungwoo put his hand on the desk, between the guard and the radio. Not a threat, not quite, but specific. Before you do that, you should understand that the person you're about to call is the compliance issue. Make that call, and in 4 hours you won't be able to explain what you knew and when. Don't make it, and this is simply a late-night visit that you were professional enough to manage without incident. He held the man's gaze. I'll ask you once. The guard didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then he stepped aside. Room 14 was at the end of a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and forced air. The door was locked with a secondary deadbolt, added recently, the new hardware not yet matched to the surrounding frame. One of Sungwoo's people worked it. 30 seconds. 40. Sungwoo stood very still in the corridor and did not allow himself to think about what it would mean to be 40 seconds too late. The lock gave. The room was small, a bed, a monitor, a single chair. The monitor showed stable vitals. The chair was empty. And on the bed, Amara, still, pale in the institutional light, an IV line in her arm, her breathing slow and measured in the particular way of sedation rather than sleep. Sung-woo crossed the room. He crouched beside the bed. He looked at her face, a face he had spent years convincing himself he no longer remembered in detail, and his jaw tightened with the specific tension of a man holding something in by force. Amara. Low. Steady. Nothing. Amara. His hand found her wrist. Not her hand, he didn't allow himself that, and he pressed gently. You need to come back. A pause long enough to become frightening. Then her eyes moved beneath their lids. A slow, resistant return, like someone surfacing from a very deep place. When she finally opened her eyes and found his face above her, confusion moved through hers, and then understanding, and then something that broke open without sound. The girls, she said, barely a voice, a breath shaped into words. They're safe, he said. They're at my house. They're warm and they're safe. The sound Amara made then was not a word. It was the sound of 14 hours of terror leaving the body all at once, released from somewhere below language, below thought, from the place where a mother keeps the things she cannot afford to let herself feel until she knows her children are alive. He stayed crouched beside her until it passed. He said nothing. There was nothing adequate to say. Choi Min-jae was home when they came for him. Of course he was. He didn't know yet that the thread had been pulled. He was in his study, surrounded by his orchids, his antiques, the composed atmosphere of a man who believes everything is still in order, when Sung-woo walked in and laid it out. London, the visit to Amara, the disappearance, the girls, the letter, the facility, each piece placed on the table between them with the unhurried precision of someone who has already won and is simply letting the other person catch up. Min-jae listened, and when it was done, he didn't deny it. She would have destroyed you, he said, and the truly disturbing thing was not the words, it was that he meant them, completely. This was not justification, this was belief. Not deliberately, but a woman that good, that visible in your life, she would have been taken within a year, used, and you would have followed her into ruin. He looked at Sung-woo steadily. I protected you. I made a hard decision because you weren't able to. You decided, Sung-woo said, very quietly, that it was yours to make. Silence. And 6 months ago, Sung-woo said, when she started asking questions, something shifted behind Min-jae's eyes, infinitesimally. I couldn't let her get to you, not after everything. I was careful, Sung-woo said. One word. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Min-jae stopped. You had one chance to tell me where she was. You've already used it. He turned and walked out.
He did not look back. He didn't need to. Some doors, once closed, don't need to be watched. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. The only question is whether you're brave enough to walk through them. It was nearly 5 in the morning when he came back. The storm had released the city. Not suddenly. Storms don't end suddenly. They ease, the way grief eases, gradually, then all at once, leaving everything washed and still and very, very quiet. He pushed open the front door, stopped. Layla was asleep on the couch, curled small beneath the blanket Park Jin had found, hands tucked under her cheek, her breathing slow and even, at complete rest, the kind of rest that means even in sleep she had made a decision to trust. Jada was on the floor beside her, back against the couch, knees pulled in, not sleeping, she hadn't slept. Her head came up the instant she heard the door, alert, immediate, like someone who had been keeping watch all night and was not going to pretend otherwise. She looked at his face, read it the way she'd been reading adults her entire life, searching for the thing they were trying not to show. She found what she was looking for. She's okay, he said. Jada's face did something enormous in about 2 seconds, a wave that moved through every feature, relief and something that had been held too tightly for too long, and then she pressed her lips together hard and looked at the ceiling and blinked several times. "Can we see her?" "She's being checked, an hour, maybe less." A pause. "She'll be here." Jada nodded. She looked at Layla, still sleeping, still trusting, and then back at him. "You're really our dad." Not a question, not an accusation. The tone of a child testing a fact against the weight of reality, seeing if it holds. Sang-woo did not sit in the chair across the room. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, eye level. Jada noticed, filed it. "The letter says so, and I believe your mother. But what that means going forward, what shape it takes, that's not my decision to make alone. It belongs to all of us." He paused. "If that's what everyone wants." She studied him, this child who had navigated a storm and an unfamiliar city and a man who frightened everyone who met him, and done it all in one night with her sister's hand in hers. "You're scary," she said. "The energy around you is a lot." He didn't argue. "Yes, but you came back." She looked at him. "And you sat on the floor." He said nothing. "Those things matter," she said. The tone of a person who has developed through necessity a very precise system for determining who is safe. Sang-woo looked at this 9-year-old girl who had pressed an intercom in the middle of a storm with a trembling finger and told him without apology what she needed. He hoped, in the part of him that the years hadn't reached, the part he had assumed Amara had taken with her, that it was not too late to become what they needed him to be. Not all at once, not perfectly, but genuinely. "I know," he said quietly. "They mattered to me too."
Lila stirred, opened those grave, unhurried eyes, found Sung-woo sitting on the floor beside her sister, looked at him for a moment, then at Jada. Something passed between them, the language they'd been born into, the one that didn't need words. Then Lila reached out from beneath the blanket and placed the necklace on the floor between them, not giving it to him, not returning it, just placing it in the middle, in the space where the whole story lived. He looked at it for a long time. "Your mother should have that," he said. Lila picked it up carefully, held it. "We know," she said. "We just wanted you to see it here, while it was still only ours." A pause. "Before things get complicated." Before things get complicated. Han Sung-woo, who had spent his entire adult life trying to control what complicated meant, almost smiled. "Fair enough," he said. Amara came through the door as the sky outside turned gray-pink at its edges. She was moving under her own strength, barely, one hand on the arm of the person beside her, but upright, eyes open, present. The city behind her through the open door was washed clean and silent, every surface holding the first pale light like something cupped in careful hands. She saw the girls before she was fully inside, both of them awake now, both of them running. She went down to her knees to meet them, not gently, not gracefully, but completely, and she held them both at once, one arm around each, face pressed into the space between them. And the sound she made was not a word, it was not language, it was older than that, the sound that lives at the absolute bottom of a mother, the one that only surfaces when the worst thing didn't happen. Sung-woo stood in the hallway and watched. He watched Jada's hands grip the back of her mother's jacket. He watched Lila's eyes close. He watched Amara hold them with her whole body, like she was trying to cover all the space the last 14 hours had opened up. He watched all of it, and he looked away. When he looked back, Amara's eyes were on him. Across the entrance hall, across 10 years of silence, of a necklace worn every day, of a choice made in fear by a woman trying to protect something she loved from a world she couldn't fully enter. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Some reckonings don't begin with words. They begin with remaining in the room, with not looking away, with choosing second by second to stay inside the weight of the thing rather than retreating to the easier space that exists just on the other side of turning around. He stayed. She stayed. The distance didn't close entirely. It wouldn't. Not tonight, not quickly. Perhaps not for a long time. What had been undone between them wasn't the kind of thing that mended in a single morning, and both of them were too honest, too tired, too real to pretend otherwise. But some things shifted, fractionally, the way tectonic things shift, invisibly, underneath, where it counts. Jada watched them both from the circle of her mother's arms, her evaluating eyes moving between the two adults with the particular attention of a child quietly writing the next chapter. Lila kept her eyes closed. Her hand found her mother's hand. Her thumb found the necklace and held it. Outside, Seoul completed its transition into morning. Traffic began its low, even murmur. A vendor somewhere opened a shutter with a sound like a single note. The Han River, visible between buildings from the high ground of the compound, lay silver and motionless in the new light. Calm, the way water is calm after it has moved through something very large. Seong-woo looked at the three of them in his entrance hall. The woman he had never fully stopped looking for. The daughters he hadn't known to look for at all. And he understood, in the complete, quiet way that only the most important truths ever arrive, that the most dangerous thing to happen to him in 41 years had not been the enemies, or the ruin, or the 1,000 dark negotiations that had built his empire stone by stone. It was this: a storm at the wrong hour, a gate that opened, a small hand pressing an intercom, trembling but pressing, and a door he had decided at the very last moment to open. Some nights choose you. This was one of them.